in a post-COVID world where some of the newest companies are emerging as remote, I think despise is too harsh a term, but I do not like the term outsourcing. Not because outsourcing as a thing is not a thing. I think it's just if we're creating like remote teams and remote workers around the world, I think outsourcing has this implication of like, creating others. It's like, it's us, the group, and then it's like them, typically overseas somewhere in some sort of back office function. I kind of despise that. And I think the reason is, in our case, we've managed to build a contractor network around the world, from Argentina to Kosovo, to Ukraine, to India, to New York, to San Francisco, to Hawaii, to Spain, to Florida. And there's incredibly talented architects and engineers around the world. And our ability to connect those folks with dignified and great work is something that I'm like incredibly proud of. Just because I'm an architect in a particular part of the world, and perhaps maybe the local economy isn't in a place where, it might afford me opportunities to work there, it doesn't mean that I don't have things to bring to the table. And so our ability to connect incredibly talented architects, engineers with work around the world is something that I think I'm incredibly proud of. And I purposely don't use the word outsource because it almost implies you're kind of washing your hands of responsibility, and it's like whatever comes back to you comes back to you. And in many ways, you kind of have a finger to point to if it's not right. Instead, I think creating a culture where, sure, there is a core team that's responsible for the design and execution and quality control of the overall network, but we treat our partners as if they were part of our team, right? And I think that there's nuances there in how you approach the culture in a way that's not like us versus them, but it's like, hey, we're all in this together. And in many ways, I guess, maybe the way Uber would not exist without their driver network, Airbnb wouldn't exist without their, host and, network. In many ways, we wouldn't exist, right, without the incredibly talented folks around the world, that we just happen to be building a platform that connects people with digitization projects. In our case, I think that's evolved into how we think about operating strategy. And I guess the reason why it kind of irks me is because, again, in a post-COVID environment where now it's almost by default, a lot of companies are remote. Now it starts to begin to like blur the lines. Well, then why have we for so long called, folks overseas, which we know kind of implies, like non-US folks as outsourced, with now most people's staffs are spread all over. So I think by definition, it's going to create definitely a much more global workforce. Long term, I think that's good for folks around the world. Short term, it does beg the question, I think specifically for like American workers, like what does this actually mean when now you're not competing with every person in New York City, which is where I'm in, but now I'm like competing with like quite literally everyone. But I think it's healthy.